getting everything set, ready to go. We are. I'm going to check the audio first before I get started. Heard my voice somewhere, just don't quite know where. Okay, that was on D Live. It looks like my audio is coming through there perfectly fine. Let's see what Kick sounds like. Twitch has got the little loading thing going on. Might have to reload X. See what's going on here real quick. I have been having some issues today, so trying to get it all sorted out. Looks like I have to reload everything. So the Rumble sounds good. Waiting for Twitch, X, and D Live to all reload. So on Twitch, it's popping up finally. Hear what it says once it pops in. It's posting on X that Esoteric Agenda is up there, but that's about it. So I'm gonna have to reload freaking D Live again. Let me see here. All right, so it sounds good on Twitch. Waiting for it to load on X. It finally started going, and it's having some issues. Sounds good on X. So X sounds good. All right, now let's find out what it sounds like on D Live. Sounds good on D Live, and now sounds good on Kick. Everything is up and going. So today is my new episode that I'm coming out with. I'm going to give WoW Talk a rest for the rest of the year. And with the next project I'm moving on to is Esoteric Agenda. So um, I'm going to go ahead and get this going. I've got the talking points all set up and ready to go. So with that, I'll do my countdown and I will start the episode. So 3, 2, 1, now. Hey everybody, and welcome to the wonderful world of weirdness. Today is the first episode for the live stream of Esoteric Agenda. Now, I've been uploading shorter 15-minute videos of Esoteric Agenda on my channels for YouTube and Rumble, but this is going to be the newer live stream version for Esoteric Agenda. Now, a little history on that. Though the content that I put on Agenda or Esoteric Agenda And the cut is old material that I have gathered up from the time I first started getting into this stuff. So that's basically what's going on with that. Now, this is my opportunity to go back in and to do these episodes again and get get more into it. At the time, I didn't have that good of equipment to actually do live streams. So with some of the older stuff, you can kind of see how that went. But I was even debating on if I wanted to do this with Esoteric Agenda or just leave it alone and be able to publish the old content. But I finally decided, yeah, I might as well do it because that gives me a chance to revisit some of this old stuff that I was interested in when I first got started. And you saw some of that whenever I was doing my videos with not the Cosmic Weave, but uh, Ancient Mysteries, which had to do with Eusebius. Now, on Minds, I had started doing short videos with Sibel, and I've got those uploading onto Rumble now. I don't think I have them on YouTube, but I'm not really going to take the time to upload them on there. I'm just going to old, let the old content go over to Rumble and be done with it. So that's basically the background of all that and what's going on there. So I have that all uploaded and it should be ready to go. Now today I am going to start my first episode of the first live stream for Esoteric Agenda. And the best place to start out with is Sartelius Euplus, who was a Roman official and whose name appears in inscriptions associated with public works and religious dedications during the Roman Empire. Now, this is where I'm going to start out with, but we are going to go into different areas and discuss different things. These are my talking points, so I'm going to get on with it. So we have Cartelius Euplus, okay? And like I said, he was a Roman official whose name appeared in inscriptions associated with public works and religious dedications during the Roman Empire. Though not widely known or heavily documented in primary sources, he is most notably referenced in an inscription related to the Magna Martyr cult, who he is recorded as having donated a gift, likely a structure or offering in honor of the goddess. Now, this act would have been demonstrated in pietas, the Roman virtue of religion or religious and civil or civic duty, which was particularly emphasized in public dedications to state-recognized deities. Cartelius Euplus's gift may have been part of a broader patronage activity that linked wealthy or political ambitious individuals to the promotion of imperial cults or long-standing traditional Roman religious practices. Now, Magna Carta, or Great Mother, refers to the goddess Cybele, whose worship was originally Phrygian but was incorporated into Roman religion in the 3rd century BCE. Her rituals and cult practices were known for their intense and often ecstatic character, contrasting with more restrained and formal rites of traditional Roman worship. Magna Mater rituals included procession, music with cymbals and drums, ecstatic dancing, and, in some cases, acts of self mutilation performed by her priests, the Galli. Now, these eunuch priests underwent rituals which consist of ritual castration, and it was as a part of their devotion, imitating the myth of Attis, a consort of Cybele, who is believed to have castrated himself in a frenzy of divine madness. The rituals surrounding Magna Marta were particularly prominent during the festival of Magolicia, celebrated in April. During this festival, the sacred black stone representing the goddess was paraded through the streets, and dramatic performances and sacrifices were conducted. While the rituals were respected by the state and integrated into Roman religious life, there was a clear distinction between the public ceremonies accepted by Roman society and the more private, ecstatic elements of the cult, which were sometimes regarded as suspicious or distasteful by the Roman elite. Cartilius Uplis, or Cartilius Uplis's donations to the Magna Marta cult would have aligned him with a recognized and important deity whose worship symbolized Rome's connection to ancient Eastern traditions and divine favor. It would also have reinforced his standing in the community as a person of influence and religious commitment. Though specific details of his gift are scarce, such deductions were typically inscribed on altars, columns, or temples, and served both as religious offerings and as a public monument to the donor's piety and status. The Magna Mater, or Great Goddess, was worshipped at Ostia, the ancient port city of Rome, as part of a religious tradition that extended from the city's deep ties to both Roman state cults and foreign deities. Known originally as the Phrygian goddess Cybele, the Magna Marta was officially brought into Roman religious practice in 204 BCE, and her cult quickly became widespread across the empire, particularly in cosmopolitan and mercantile centers like Ostia. In Ostia, the cult of the Magna Marta was housed in a sanctuary that reflected both Roman architectural sensibility and Eastern religious practices. Excavations have revealed a temple complex in the city dedicated to her, which included a shrine and altar, often positioned near or within a larger complex featured that also featured dedications to Attis, her consort. The presence of Magna Marta in Ostia underscores the city's role as a hub for religious syncretism, where Roman citizens, freemen, and immigrants from across the empire could participate in diverse forms of worship. The temple was located in the campus of Magna Marta, and archaeological remains include inscriptions, statutory, and ritual implements associated with her ceremonies. The rituals performed in her honor at Ostia followed the same general pattern found throughout the empire. These included possessions, offerings, music, and aesthetic performances by the Galli, who were eunuch priests serving the goddess. Public festivals such as the Magalisa were celebrated there as well, featuring theatrical performances and ceremonial feasts. While some of these rites were public and state sanctioned, others, particularly those involving self mutilation or mortification or frenzied devotion, were carried out in private or semi public settings and may have been viewed with a mixture of reverence and suspicion by traditional Roman elites. The iconography found in the Ostian sanctuary, including reliefs and statues, often depicts the Magna Marta enthroned and flanked by lions, a common symbol of her power and untamed nature. These artistic elements, along with epigraphic evidence of personal dedications, indicate a vibrant and active cult that appealed to a wide range of social classes in Ostia. The worship of the Magna Marta at Ostia exemplifies the blend of Eastern and Roman religious elements and highlights the city's importance as a religious as well as economic gateway to Rome. Pietas, often rendered simply as piety in English, was one central virtue in ancient Roman society, encompassing a complex set of obligations and attitudes towards the gods, one's family, and the state. Unlike the modern use of the word piety, which often refers primarily to religious devotion, pietas in Roman thought was broader and more comprehensive. It described a dutiful respect and a sense of responsibility, not only to the divine, but also to parents, ancestors, and Rome itself. In the religious context, pietas meant honoring the gods through proper rituals, sacrifices, and observances of festivals. A person with pietas was expected to maintain the tradition of Roman worship, perform sacrifices correctly, and consult oracles or auguries when appropriate. This virtue was not optional, but a deeply ingrained cultural expectation. Neglecting pietas could be seen as threatening the social and cosmic order. Within the family, pietas involved respecting one's elders, caring for parents in old age, maintaining the memory of the ancestors, and fulfilling family obligations. Filial piety, loyalty, and duty to one's father and family line, was considered a cornerstone of Roman morality. In literature, characters who exhibited pietas were often held up as moral exemplars. A notable case is the hero Aeneas in Virgil's Aeneid, Aeneid, who was frequently described as pious Aeneas, which I have a hard time with because I want to say anus, highlighting his commitment to duty over personal desires. Political and socially, pietas extended to fulfilling civic responsibilities, defending the state, and serving in public office with integrity. A Roman citizen who displayed pietas would be seen as upholding the republic or the empire by contributing to its stability and prosperity. In this way, the concept unified private, public, and divine spheres under the same single moral idea. Pietas was also deified and personified in Roman religion. Temples and statues were erected in her honor, and emperors would often emphasize their own pietas in inscriptions and coins to promote their legitimacy and connection to Roman tradition. For example, coins from the imperial period sometimes depicted Pietas as a woman offering incense at an altar, symbolizing devotion and duty. Overall, Pietas served as one of the foundational values of Roman identity. It was both a personal and communal virtue that reinforced the structure of Roman religion, family life, and government. In its fullest in its fullest expression, it represented the ideal Roman citizen, loyal to the gods, the family, and the state, with each loyalty reinforcing the others. Claudia Quinta is a legendary figure from early Roman history who became emblematic of Roman virtue, particularly the idea of pudic- pudicitia, pudicitia, Pudicia, or chastity. Her story. No, wait, hold up. Let me go ahead and redo that. I really shouldn't say that word again, but I'll try. Roman history. Okay, Claudia Quinta is a legendary figure from early Roman history who became emblematic of Roman virtue, particularly the idea of pudicitia or chastity. Her story is closely associated with the arrival of the cult of Magna Marta, which is Cybele, in Rome during the Second Punic War around 204 BCE. According to tradition, when the Romans decided to import the goddess from Phrygia, modern day Turkey, to Rome in a response to ominous prophecies during the war with Hannibal, her sacred image, a black stone believed to embody the goddess, was transported by sea. As the ship carried the Magna Marta reached the mouth of the Tiber River, it became stuck and could not be pulled upstream. The priest interpreted this as a divine sign that only a woman of perfect chastity could successfully bring the goddess into the city. Claudia Quinta, a Roman matron of noble birth who had been the subject of rumors and slander concerning her virtue, stepped forward to provide her innocence and devotion. She prayed to the goddess for vindication, asserting her chastity before the people and the gods. Then, according to the story, she miraculously hauled the massive ship free with her own hands, thereby clearing her name and winning the divine approval. Clearing her name and winning divine approval. Following this event, Claudia Quinta was celebrated as an ideal Roman woman, devoted, modest, and pious. Her image became a symbol of Roman morality and divine favor. Statues and reliefs depicted her in Roman dress, sometimes pulling the ship's ropes, and she was honored in rituals connected to the Magna Marta cult, particularly during the festival of the Magalicia. Her story served both religious and political purposes. In religious terms, she embodied the intermediary between Roman society and a foreign deity, proving that Roman virtue was strong enough to integrate and purify external religious influences. Politically, she reinforced the message that Roman women played vital roles in securing the favor of the gods and safeguarding the city's future. Claudia Quinta's legacy lived on in Roman art and literature as an enduring model of female virtue and divine favor. Later emperors and noble families sometimes used her image or referenced her story to associate themselves with purity, moral strength, and the protective power of Rome's gods. The title Mater Deum, meaning Mother of the Gods, refers primarily to the goddess Cybele in her Roman form, who was adopted into Roman religion from her origins in Phrygia in modern-day Turkey. In Greek religion, she was known as Meter Theon, Metertheon, or Magna Meter Theon, which is Magnametertheon. And the Romans translated this into Latin, which was Magna Mater Deum Idea, which is Magnameterdeumidea, which means Great Mother of the Gods of Ida. The epithet emphasizes her role as a primary cosmic force, a mother figure not only to the gods themselves but also to the natural and spiritual realms over which they preside. As the Mater Deum, Cybele represented the fertile power of the earth, the generative force behind all life. Her worship involved themes of death and rebirth, seasonal cycles, and ecstatic devotion. She was considered both nurturing and fearsome, a protector of cities and people, but also a wild, untamed force capable of inspiring madness or divine frenzy. This duality was reflected in her mythology and rituals. She was said to dwell in the mountains surrounded by lions and accompanied by her consort Attis, whose tragic self-castration and rebirth were key elements of her mythological cycle. The Roman state officially adopted the worship of the martyrdom during a time of crisis, the Second Punic War, after consulting the Sibylline books, or Sibylline books, which recommended bringing her from Pessinus in Phrygia to aid the Roman cause. Her arrival marked a moment of cultural expansion in Roman religion, incorporating Eastern deities into the Roman pantheon while framing them within Roman values. The goddess was housed in a temple on the Palatine Hill and honored during the annual festival of Megalesia in April, which included processions, games, and ritual performances. While her state cult was relatively restrained, the more ecstatic and mystical aspects of her worship were conducted by her eunuch priests, the Galli, which is spelled Galli, for anybody who is interested. It included frenzied dancing, music, self-flagellation, and, in some cases, self-castration, mirroring Attis's sacrifice. These, these practices were considered foreign and even disturbing to many Roman elites, yet they were tolerated and even honored within defined ceremonial spaces, highlighting the complex relationship Rome had with foreign cults and the boundaries of acceptable religious expression. The title martyrdom thus uh, carried profound religious, symbolic, and political significance. It linked Cybele to the broader pantheon, not only as a mother figure but also as a stabilizing cosmic force whose presence was meant to protect Rome and ensure its prosperity. Through her, the Romans sought to express their control over nature, their openness to outside traditions, and their alignment with divine power during times of both crisis and triumph. The Galli were the eunuchs, or the eunuch priests of the goddess Cybele, also known as the Magna Marta or Martyrdom, whose cult was brought into Rome from Phrygia during the 3rd century BCE. Now, these priests occupied a unique and often controversial place in Roman religious life due to their extreme practices and their deviation from Roman norms concerning gender and priesthood. The Galli originated in the Phrygian tradition tied to the myth of Cybele and her consort Attis. In this myth, Attis, a mortal of exceptional beauty, was driven to madness and castrated himself beneath a pine tree. He died as a result, and Cybele either resurrected him or caused him to be eternally remembered. This myth served as the spiritual foundation for the Galli, who demonstrated their devotion by ritually castrating themselves, typically during a spring ceremony known as the Day of Blood. This act was part of a broader festival that commemorated Attis's death and rebirth. The terms of appearance and behavior. No, in terms of appearance and behavior, the Galli dressed in brightly colored, non-Roman garments, wore their hair long, and often adopted feminine styles of speech and conduct. They carried ritual instruments such as drums, cymbals, and performed ecstatic dances, particularly during public religious festivals. Their ceremonies included frenzied motion, and acts of self mortification intended to reach a state of religious ecstasy. To conservative Roman society, these displays were startling and unorthodox, but the state permitted them within clearly defined limits because the cult of Magna Marta had been officially sanctioned. Roman citizens were legally forbidden to become Galli, as the act of castration was considered a grave violation of Roman idols of masculinity and self-control. Therefore, most Galli were foreigners or slaves. Their ambiguous status, combining elements of male and female identity, as well as their intense rituals, placed them the, outside of the social norms of Roman life. Nonetheless, they were sacred within the cult context and served as vital religious intermediaries. Despite their marginalization, the Galli played an important role during festivals such as the Magalesia, held each April in honor of the Magna Mater or Mater. During this celebration, they led rituals, processions, and sacrifices. While their own ceremonies were often ecstatic and dramatic, the Roman state maintained a parallel, more conservative version of the festival that involved the Senate and public games. Over time, the Galli came to symbolize Rome's complex relationship with foreign religions. Their presence showed how Roman religion could incorporate foreign deities and rituals, though often with restrictions designed to maintain Roman cultural boundaries. Through their radical devotion, the Galli embodied the mysteries and powerful nature of the goddess. They served and highlighted the tension between Roman tradition and religious transformation. Attis was a central figure in the mythology of the Phrygian and later Roman cult of Cybele, also known as the Magna Mater or Great Mother. Originating in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, the myth of Attis spread throughout the Greco-Roman world, where it took on various forms, particularly through its connection to ecstatic religious rites and themes of death and rebirth. In the myth, Attis was a beautiful youth, often described as a shepherd or semi-divine being. His story is intimately tied to Cybele, the great mother goddess who embodied the wild, fertile, and untamed forces of nature. According to the most common version of the tale, Cybele fell in love with Attis, but he became involved romantically with a mortal woman. In a fit of divine jealousy and rage, Cybele drove Attis mad, leading him to castrate himself in a frenzy beneath a pine tree, where he either died or was transformed. The pine tree became sacred in his honor. In some versions of the story, Cybele later resurrects him or grants him some form of eternal life or spiritual immortality. The myth of Attis carries deeply symbolic weight, especially in connection with seasonal cycles and agricultural renewal. His death and rebirth were often seen as metaphors for the death of vegetation in winter and its return in spring. This cyclical theme was central to the rituals of his cult, which were especially intense and emotionally charged. In Roman religious practice, Attis was honored alongside Cybele, particularly during the spring festival of the Magalesia. One of the most dramatic moments occurred during the Dies Sanguinis, or Day of Blood, when the Galli priest of Cybele would imitate Attis by engaging in self-flagellation, ecstatic dancing, and in some cases, ritual castration. These acts were meant to symbolize the loss of spiritual rebirth. No. These acts were meant to symbolize the loss and spiritual rebirth of Attis, and were believed to bring the devotee closer to divine understanding and purity. Attis also symbolized a form of divine suffering and transformation. His story appealed to certain mystery religions in the Roman world, particularly to those who sought personal salvation through suffering, initiation, and rebirth. While his cult remained somewhat peripheral in Roman state religion, its emotional intensity and mystical character attracted many followers from different parts of the empire. Attis represents one of the more vivid examples of ancient religious syncretism, where local deities and myths were adapted to fit new cultural and religious environments. His myth retained its core themes of love, madness, sacrifice, and renewal, but was interpreted differently depending on the context in which it was practiced, whether in Phrygia, Greece, or Rome. The ritual of Attis, particularly as they evolved in the Roman cult of Cybele, involved powerful symbolic elements: the pine tree, the bull, and the disc, all of which played distinct roles in the mythology and religious practices, or the religious practice surrounding Attis's death, rebirth, and spiritual significance. These rituals were central to the festival of the Magalesia, celebrated in early spring, and were designed to reenact and honor the mythic suffering and transformation of Attis. The pine tree was one of the most potent symbols in the Attis cult. It represented the site of Attis's castration and death. According to the myth, Attis, driven mad by the jealousy or divine frenzy caused by Cybele, mutilated himself beneath a pine tree and died there. In the ritual reenactments, the pine tree functioned as a substitute for the body of Attis himself. During the spring festival, a young pine tree was cut from the forest, carried in a solemn procession, and decorated with violets, ribbons, and an effigy of Attis. This tree, treated as sacred, was brought into the temple of Cybele with great reverence, symbolizing the mourning of the goddess and the temporary death of the natural world, which would soon be reversed with Attis's resurrection or symbolic return to life. The bull sacrifice, known as the Taurobolium, was a later Roman addition to the cult and became a significant ritual act of purification and renewal associated with both Attis and Magna Mater. During this rite, a bull was slaughtered in a pit above which a devotee, often a priest or initiate, stood or lay on a platform with openings. As the blood of the dying bull poured down, it would drench the initiate in a baptism of blood. This rite was not originally part of the Phrygian cult, but developed as Roman religious life absorbed and reinterpreted elements of Eastern mystery religions. The Taurobolium which is spelled Taurobolium, symbolized a form of spiritual rebirth and regeneration through blood, believed to cleanse the sins and grant the initiate new life, similar to the renewal that Attis experienced after death. The disk, often interpreted as a solar symbol, reflected cosmic dimensions of the cult. While not always explicitly described in literary sources, the disk in ritual context likely represents the sun or divine light, serving as a celestial counterpart to Attis's rebirth and ascension. The Roman mystery cults' solar imagery frequently played a role in signifying divine enlightenment, the soul's journey in the eternal cycle of life and death. The disk may have been used in conjunction with altars or carried during processions, acting as a ritual focus that underscored Attis's divine nature in his transformation from a mortal youth to an immortal being associated with celestial powers. Together, these ritual elements, the pine tree, the bull, and the disk, form a powerful symbolic triad that captured the essence of Attis's myth. The tree anchored his suffering to the natural world. The bull's sacrifice provided a dramatic rite of passage for human participants seeking purification, and the disk offered a cosmic perspective on the cycle of death and rebirth. These symbols merged myth with lived religious experience, allowing devotees to participate directly in the sacred drama and to seek personal spiritual renewal through the emulation of divine suffering and transformation. The festival of Megalisa was one of the most prominent religious celebrations in ancient Rome, devoted to the worship of Magna Martyr, who was also known as Cybele, the Great Mother of the Gods. The festival took place annually from April the 4th to April the 10th and was marked by a series of elaborate public rituals, games, music, and theatrical performances that reflect both the Roman adaptation of Phrygian traditions and the unique mythological themes surrounding Cybele and her consort Attis. Megalesia originated from the Roman reception of the cult of Cybele during the Second Punic War in 2004 BCE. During a period of crisis, Roman authorities consulted the Sibylline books and were advised to bring the goddess's sacred black stone. Sacred black stone, believed to be a meteorite symbolizing her presence from Pessinus in Phrygia to Rome. The goddess was installed on the Palatine Hill, and a temple was dedicated to her in 191 BCE. From this point forward, Magnesia was celebrated as a former state festival, though its rites retained their exotic and ecstatic Phrygian character. The festival began with processions and ritual purifications. One of the most distinctive elements was the carrying of the sacred image or symbols of Cybele, often associated with lions, mountains, and timpanum, a large framed drum, through the streets of Rome. Music played a crucial role in the festivities, with flutes, cymbals, and drums used to create a frenzied and ecstatic atmosphere. This music, along with dancing and chanting, was associated with the ecstatic nature of the goddess and her myth. Central to the emotional heart of Megalesia was the myth of Attis, Cybele's consort, who died beneath a pine tree after self-castration and was later restored or reborn. A pine tree was cut and brought into the temple as a sacred symbol of Attis. The climax of the festival came on April 10th, often identified as the Day of Hilaria, a time a time of joy and renewal that celebrated the resurrection or rebirth of Attis. In earlier days of the festival, mourning and grief were emphasized through solemn rituals imitating Cybele's sorrow at Attis's death. The mood then shifted dramatically to celebration, with feasting, rejoicing, and games held in honor of the goddess and her divine consort. The Gali, the eunuch priest of Cybele, played a visible and often controversial role in the Megalesia. Dressed in bright robes and jewelry, they led processions, dancing in wild ecstasy, and sometimes engaged in acts of self-mortification. Their presence and behavior, which differed sharply from Roman norms of masculinity and priestly decorum, fascinated and disturbed many Roman observers, but their role was seen as essential in the proper performance of the cult's rites. While the more extreme Phrygian rituals, such as castration and ecstatic frenzy, were generally kept out of official Roman religious life, they were tolerated during Megalesia because of the festival's foreign and mystical nature. Over time, elements of the cult were increasingly syncretized into Roman religion, but Megalesia retained its distinct identity as a celebration of an Eastern mystery goddess who offered spiritual transformation and divine connection. Thus, Megalesia was not just a civic celebration, but a deeply symbolic religious event. It reinforced the power of the goddess, the mystery of death and rebirth, and the Roman ability to absorb and integrate foreign religious traditions into its own culture and spiritual life. The private rituals associated with the cult of Cybele and Attis, particularly those involving self-mortification and frenzied devotion, represented some of the most intense and controversial religious practices of the ancient world. While public ceremonies such as processions and music were sanctioned and participated in by Roman citizens during festivals like the Megalesia, the private ecstatic rites practiced by initiates, especially the Gali or eunuch priests, were far more radical, deeply emotional, and symbolic of spiritual transformation. One of the defining aspects of these private rituals was self-mortification. Participants, especially the Gali, would engage in acts of physical suffering to express devotion, achieving purification, or emulate the suffering of Attis. who in myth castrated himself and died in a state of divine frenzy. During specific ritual moments, particularly during the spring rites leading up to the festival of Hilaria, devotees would enter a trance-like or ecstatic state brought on by intense music, rhythmic dancing, fasting, and sensory overstimulation. This altered state of consciousness allowed them to become spiritually aligned with the narrative of Attis's madness, self-destruction, and eventual rebirth. The most extreme expression of this imitation was ritual castration. While not all worshippers practiced this, some male initiatives, particularly the Gali, would castrate themselves in a state of religious ecstasy. This act was believed to be a sacrifice of sexual and worldly identity, aligning the initiate with Attis, who in myth mutilated himself beneath a pine tree. The act symbolizes total devotion to the goddess and a rejection of earthly life in favor of spiritual union with the divine. Following castration, these individuals adopted female clothing, hairstyles, and identities, living as third gender or transgender figures within the cult, which further set them apart from the normative Roman civilian body. Other acts of self-mortification included whipping oneself, striking the body with swords or knives, or enduring other forms of physical pain during rituals of mourning and renewal. These actions were not seen as punishment, but as purifying and transformational experiences that mirrored the suffering of spiritual resurrection of Attis. Blood in this context was considered sacred and regenerative. The blood spilled during these acts was thought to cleanse sins, grant rebirth, and bring the participant closer to the divine mysteries of life and death. Alongside physical acts, the frenzied devotion of the cults was sustained by ritual music and dance. The pounding of drums, the shrieking of flutes, and the clashing of cymbals were used to overwhelm the senses and facilitate ecstatic states. Particular participants would dance wildly, sing hymns, and cry out in joy or lamentation. In these moments of religious ecstasy, devotees believed they could experience a direct encounter with the divine, particularly with Cybele herself. These ecstatic rites were seen as a way of to transcend the limitation of human body and mind, offering glimpses into the eternal cycles of nature, death, and rebirth. These private rituals, while crucial to the core spiritual experience of the cult, were kept separate from Roman civil religious life. Roman authorities tolerated them only as long as they remained outside the formal political and military structures of Roman identity. Despite this separation, the cult of Cybele and Attis remained a powerful presence in Roman spiritual cultures, particularly among marginalized individuals who found in it a path to transcendence, transformation, and spiritual liberation through suffering and divine communion. The symbolism of being enthroned and flanked by lions in the context of the cult of Cybele and Magna Martyr or Great Mother is rich in meaning, drawing in ancient Near Eastern iconography, mythological motifs, and religious metaphors to communicate divine authority, dominion over nature, and transcendence of chaos. Cybele is often depicted seated on a throne between two lions, either resting beside her or yoked to her chariot. These lions are not merely decorative, they serve as powerful symbols of the wild, untamed forces of nature and the boundary between civilization and the primordial world. In enthroning herself among lions, Cybele is visually represented as a deity who has subdued these forces, not by destroying them, but by harmonizing with them. This signifies her majesty over the natural world and the instincts of the animal realm, reflecting her identity as a mother goddess of fertility, mountains, wild places, and the cycle of life and death. In ancient Near Eastern and Anatolian traditions from which the cult of Cybele evolved, lions were commonly associated with storm gods, warrior kings, and chthonic forces. When Cybele is shown seated between lions, she inherits and transforms that imagery. Rather than being a god of conquest or wrath, she is portrayed as a sovereign, maternal figure whose power lies in integration rather than domination. She is the generative force who presides over both birth and destruction, holding the balance between the nurturing and devouring aspects of life. The throne itself also plays an important role in the iconography. Being enthroned signifies legitimacy, permanence, and the goddess's rule over a cosmic or natural order. When combined with the presence of lions, the imagery evokes a being who does not merely preside over a political domain, as kings do, but who is seated at the heart of the primordial world. Her throne is not in a palace, but in the wilderness, the domain of mountains, caves, and beasts, signaling that her power is pre-civilizational and eternal. In the Roman imagination, this symbolism was particularly potent. It set Cybele apart from the more rational civic gods of the Roman pantheon. She represented a mystery, an ecstatic and primordial power that originated outside the city, from the east, and from the ancestral past. Her lions reminded Roman audiences that her dominion extended into spaces that were dangerous, fertile, and sacred, beyond the beyond the control of emperors or armies. Her position between them showed that she was not just a goddess of motherhood or agriculture, but of transformation and initiation into the mysteries of life. Moreover, the lions can be interpreted psychologically or spiritually as representations of the passions, the unconscious, or the untamed aspects of the self. In this reading, the image of Cybele enthroned among them becomes a metaphor for spiritual mastery, the inner balance of chaos and order. To align with her, a worshiper might seek to tame or integrate their own inner wilderness, symbolized by lions through rituals, devotion, and personal sacrifices. Thus, the symbolism of Cybele enthroned and flanked by lions encapsulates a complex fusion of power, fertility, danger, and cosmic authority. It reflects her identity as a goddess who does not just preside over life, but contains all its contradiction, birth and death, wilderness and civilization, order and chaos in a single, all-encompassing maternal presence. In Roman culture, pietas was a central virtue encompassing duty, loyalty, and reverence, especially toward the gods, the state, and family. For individuals considered to embody pietas, the consultation of oracles or auguries was not merely a superstitious act, but a solemn responsibility. These practices were part of maintaining the harmonious relationship between humans and the divine, which was believed to secure the favor of the gods and preserve the welfare of the Roman state and its people. Consulting oracles or auguries was undertaken with deliberate ritual purity and respect. Those who were pietous-minded would approach these divine channels with humility and reverence, recognizing that the gods communicated through signs and omens. To ignore such messages or to interpret them dishonestly was considered impious and could invite divine disfavor. Therefore, pious individuals often followed strict procedures, sometimes abstaining from sex, fasting, or engaging in purification rites before engaging in divination. Augury, the interpretation of the will of the gods through the observation of birds, was especially integral to Roman public and private decision-making. Augurs, priests specially trained in this discipline, would observe the flight patterns, calls, the types of birds at specific sacred locations known as templum. A pious person would either personally observe these signs or more commonly consult an augur before making significant decisions such as marriage, political action, or political actions, military campaigns, or religious dedications. To ignore the augur's reading was not just imprudent, it was seen as a violation of pietas and the divine order. Oracles, though more commonly associated with Greek religious life, were also consulted by Romans, especially in periods of Rome, especially in later periods as Rome absorbed Hellenistic culture. Pious individuals or state representatives might consult Sibylline oracles or visit famous oracle sites such as Delphi, Dodona, or Cumae. The Sibylline books, for example, were a collection of prophetic writings kept by the state and only consulted during times of crisis. It was through these that deeply pious figures such as priests or senators sought guidance in times of plague, war, and disaster, often leading to the introduction of foreign cults like that of Magna Mater. In all cases, the process of consultation reflected the Roman view that the gods were involved in human affairs and expected proper ritual and moral behavior in return for their guidance. The virtue of pietas compelled the individual to seek this guidance not for selfish advantage, but for the good of the broader community and in harmony with religious laws. Consulting oracles or auguries was thus an expression of one's devotion, humanity, and sense of moral responsibility within the sacred cosmic order that defined Roman religiosity. Pietas in Roman religion and culture was both deeply held was was both a deeply held virtue and a personified deity. As a concept, pietas represented cent- represented a central Roman value: dutiful respect and devotion to the gods, one's family, and the Roman state. When this abstract virtue was deified, pietas became a divine embodiment of these ideas, venerated especially during the late Republic and early Empire as a stabilizing moral force in Roman life. The deity Pietas was most commonly depicted as a matronly woman, sometimes offering a sacrifice, holding a child, or performing a gesture of devotion. This representation reinforced her association with familial piety, civil responsibility, and religious duty. Her image could often be seen on Roman coins, monuments, and altars, particularly during periods when Roman leaders wished to emphasize their own piety or the moral renewal of the state. For example, coins issued by emperors like Augustus of Antoninus Pius prominently featured pietas to signal their loyalty to Roman tradition and divine favor. The first temple to the goddess Pietas was reported built in 181 BCE by Consul Manius Acilius Glabrio, funded by fines collected for impiety. It stood near the Forum Halitorium in Rome and served as a visible testament to the importance of religious and civic duty. Unfortunately, the temple was later removed during Augustus's architectural reshaping of the city, although its ideological influence persisted. Worship of Pietas was not characterized by ecstatic rituals or elaborate mystery cults. Instead, it was expressed through acts of loyalty, sacrifice, and observance of religious and social obligations. Her cult was intertwined with Roman state religion, which did not separate ethics from worship. To honor Pietas was to affirm one's place in the Roman social order, obedient to the gods, loyal to family, and devoted to Rome's political institutions. As the empire expanded and absorbed other religious traditions, the reverence of Pietas was often emphasized in imperial propaganda. Emperors portrayed themselves and their families as paragons of pietas, aligning their rule with the favor of the gods and the moral foundations of Rome. This use of pietas as a divine symbol helped to reinforce social cohesion during times of upheaval or moral questioning. The goddess Pietas personified one of the most essential Roman virtues. Her veneration was less about mythological narratives and more about embodying and promoting the ethical framework that underpinned Roman identity. She was a divine reflection of the Roman ideal citizen, devout, loyal, and dutiful to both gods and state. Okay, so right here is probably where I do want to stop, and I will come back with episode 2 of the Esoteric Agenda. That is an hour and 15 minutes of reading. Um, like I said, I wanted to go back over this stuff and maybe do a better stream of the information. Um, like when I first went over this stuff, it was years ago, and needless to say, I had to ditch a lot of it because I didn't have proper equipment to really do it. So this is good. I like going over some of it and doing it. Actually, this is new information too that I pulled up. It's not any of the old notes or nothing. I used the old notes to find some new information to add to it. So I like that. And so far, it sounds like the good on it. I I do have everything running. I don't know how great it is running on D Live and X, or even on Kick. Everything there is kind of strange, but I figured I would go back in and see what's going on. I've been having issues all for 2 days now over this stuff. Something going on with the internet, it seems. So with that, I don't see anybody that is on making any comments. I do have, again, somebody else trying to sell me views on Twitch, of course, after I had, no, I see why I put those restrictions on there. There's nothing but spam on it. I, uh, I just don't like that at all. I got a couple comments, and then the comments went away, and all of a sudden uh, can I buy freaking views and shit like that? It's just ridiculous. So with that, I am going to go ahead and I am going to end the stream. I will see you guys later. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. Love to hear your feedback. If nothing else, just say hi and have a conversation in the comment section. And with that, I am going to go ahead and end the stream.